So, as part of the Pathfire expansion release, the Mesmer also received a new specialization that tailored to the condition damage. And so, I have been using my Condition Mirage for the past couple of months for high-end content, so you name it, Fractal of the Mist and Raids. And I can tell you from my experience that I actually enjoy my Condition Mirage when I'm doing those kind of contents. In particular, on some of the bosses that I have fought, they do cast a lot of spells, and so given the fact that the Mesmer, one of the main condition damage types of the Mesmer is Confusion, and Confusion allows me to deal additional damage whenever the target enemy casts any spells, and so subsequently that will increase my overall damage, and that's something that I like. To further add on to that one as well, the Mirage now has replaced the ability to dodge to something that they call Mirage Cloak. So whenever you cloak, you basically just evade under the attack. So the mechanic, it works the same as the distortion, so you are not, you are invulnerable to any incoming attacks. But the drawback of the new Mirage Cloak mechanic is that you are not rolling forward or rolling backwards. Instead, you're standing on the same spot and you just whirling your axe around and dealing damage to the enemies. So it does have the benefit that providing you with the additional attacks that you can inflict the condition damage onto the target enemy, but it also have a drawback is that now you can't roll back or forward or on sideways, and that is it can be dangerous, in particular if the boss or the champions or somebody casting the AoE spell and it stays at that location for a period of time. Then if you are not rolling backwards or forward, or any mechanics that one shots you from that side, then in that case it can be a little bit dangerous for you to not have the dodge roll. So please keep that in mind and factor that into your rotation and factor that into the scenario and adjust your playstyle accordingly. So without further ado, let's just head on to the specialization section and we go from there. Alright, so now let's talk about the condition damage of specialization of the Mirage. I have Chaos, Dueling, and Mirage. For Chaos, I'm having top, middle, and middle. So for the first attribute, the Descent to Madness allows me to have the ability to cast the Chaos Storm whenever I take the falling damage, or alternatively whenever I use my heal skill. And as part of my rotation, I will be using my healing skill quite a lot to pump out more damage onto the enemy, and so subsequently that will cast the spell Chaos Storm onto the enemy where I'm standing, and that will give me the benefit in the following form: Aegis, Retaliation, and Swiftness. And in regard to the enemy, it will cast the following effects: Chill, Poison, or Weakness, as you can see in this attribute. So for the next one, I have Chaotic Transference. So 10% of my toughness will be converted into the condition damage, and by default every character will have a 1000 points in their toughness, and 10% of that 1000 points is 100 points. So additional 100 points in condition damage is quite significant. For the last one, I have the Understanding increased stealth duration for my Mesmer skills, and I have a random boons whenever I'm in stealth. And as part of my rotation, I'll be using stealth quite a lot, and so I will be having a number of boons on myself. And mainly the retaliations, sorry, not the retaliation, but the Aegis, the protection, and the might are my main focus boons that I prefer to have when I'm doing meta events, or maybe I'm doing the Worthy War, or even in the high-end contents, so like Raids and Fractal of the Mist. I prefer to have more boons as much as possible. Alright, so as many as possible, I'm supposed to say, not as much. Alright, cool. Now for the next one, I have the Dueling, I have bottom, top, and top. Now for the first one, Duelist Disciplines, this pistol is allowing me to have the chance to cause bleeding, and bleeding is one of the main condition damage types that you can have for the Mirage. And my secondary weapon set is axe and pistol, and so as you can see in here that I do swap to my pistol on a regular basis, and that subsequently translate to more bleeding stat that I can put onto my enemies. Next one, I have Blighting. This one is more of my survival skill, because like these other two, the Mirror and the Fencer, I don't actually use sword, so there's no reason for me to select this. And for evasive mirror, I actually don't use any mantra skills, so there's no point. So the only remaining for me to select from is this one right here, blinding. Now for the next one, I have the superiority complex. So your critical hits deal more damage, and critical hit damage against disabled foe or foes below the health threshold is further increased. So I have an additional bonus damage of at maximum amount of 25% increase in my maximum damage when my foe is disabled or when it's reaching the health threshold of 50%. So that's something that I prefer. Now for the last one, I have the Mirage. For the Mirage, you will use the axe as your main weapon, and you will have the following effects. For my specialization, I'm having bottom, bottom, and bottom. So for the first attribute, Riddle of Sand, so when you enter in combat, your first ambush attack applies confusion. This ability refreshes when you use a shatter skill. So I actually do use a lot of my shattering as part of my rotations, but it depends on what sort of mechanic it is. So if I'm raiding in a high-end content, I don't actually use shattering skill that much, but if I'm in the meta events or when I'm doing worthy war, then I will use shattering a lot. So shattering skill is actually, let's leave it for the mechanic section. I will explain that in the further detail. For the next one, I'm having Phantasmal Seeking Axe. So release a Phantasmal Axe that seeks out the target after a delay and inflicting the torment condition damage. So that's something I prefer. The more condition damage that I can inflict onto the enemy, the better. And it's also reduce my recharge of my X skill as well, so that is always a plus. Now for the last one, I have the Sand Chase. So strike nearby enemies and inflict bleeding. So whenever I use this ability right here, you sand shards when you gain Mirage Cloak, and conditions applied to bleeding foes have increased durations. So not only that, it allows me to have an increase in condition damage in the form of my bleeding, but it also increases the duration as well. And so this is good when you can combo that with the pistol, or even without comboing with the pistol, you still have a lot of bleeding coming from your axe as well. So that is always a plus, and that's something that I prefer to use to deal more damage onto the enemy. All right. Let's talk about the weapon choice, and then I'll further go into detail about my utility choice and the mechanic. So as part of the weapons for the Condition Mirage, I have to use the axe purely on the fact that the axe has so many abilities that it can it has so many abilities, but it can also inflict a number of condition damage onto the enemy in the form of confusions. And confusion is a special condition damage type that allows you to deal additional condition damage whenever the foe is activating a skill. So this is very useful toward any mages. So for example, the elementalist, the necromancer, the another gun like Mesmer, obviously, and obviously any skill activation classes will be subjected to additional condition damage from the form in the form of confusion, and that's something that I prefer to use. And in the somewhat high-end content, so for example in raids, there are some bosses that are subjected to additional increase in damage when you use confusion on them. So that is something that I prefer to use, and that is the reason why I'm using the axe. Aside from that, axe is the main weapon of the Mirage, and so it's common sense for me to use that one. Alright, so for the axe is the main weapon, and the secondary weapon, sorry, not the secondary weapon, but the offhand weapon, I'll be using the torch, and I do have a spare pistol as my disposal, because previously I have mentioned that I will be using the bleeding, right, for my as part of my condition damage tab, and it is also the first attribute of my dueling specializations. So I keep a spare pistol on my secondary weapon set just in case that I need it. And besides, it can also provide me with the ability to have additional CC. As you can see in here, I can daze or stun the target for 2 seconds, so that is always a good thing. Now in regard to my utility, I have the Mirage Mirror, and I create a mirror at the target location, touching the mirror shatters and granting the mirror cloak to you and weakening my nearby foes. So again, as you can see in here, that the combination goes really well because I have the Mirage Mirror, and this one allows me to have additional bleeding condition damage that I can inflict onto the target enemy whenever I use this one. So as you can see, that the combo plays out really well, and it's also provide me with the ability to correct the sandstorm, the chaos storm as well, so that is good. Alright, so for the next one, I have my Mirage Mirror for my first utility, and this one is in the form of the crystal sands. So drawing shards of crystal sand that confuse foes when they pass through on their way to your target location. Man, why do they have to make these statements so bloody damn long? Anyway, so what it does, in my own understanding, shortened the statement, whatever, the description, whatever. So this one, what it does is when you drop it, it will force all of the shards of the sands coming into that location and will apply confusion. There, simple. Why do they feel the need to make it so damn bloody long? Anyway, so for the next one, I have the Signet of Midnight, so improve my condition durations. So the more the damage condition, the more condition damage stacks that I have on a single target, the longer it stays, the more damage I will do over time, and subsequently it will increase my overall damage. Now for the next one, I have the Signet of Domination, so it will increase my condition damage by 180 points. So the more condition damage points that I have, the more damage that I can deal to the enemy. Now for the last one, I have my elite. So there are a varieties of elites that I will be swapping, that I can have access to and I can choose from, and I also swap them on a regular basis. So let's walk through the first one, Jaunt. So shadow step to a target location and confuse nearby foe. So you have three counts that you can use to shadow step onto the target location, and you can apply the confusion damage onto that location. So the more confusion damage that you can apply, and if the target enemy is any spellcaster class or any skill activation class, you would deal additional damage. That's something I prefer. Other than that, I also have the ability to choose the time wrap. So this one, the wrap allows me to provide quickness onto my allies, but to be fair, I don't use that one quite that much nowadays, purely on the fact that other classes can provide the quickness to me and to my allies as well. So I only swap to this one when I feel the need to swap to. Other than that, I don't. The last one, Signet of Humility. So this one allows me to transform my target foe into a more bird, and trust me on this one, this is your most powerful CC skill in any circumstance, you name it. Elite content like raids, Fractal of the Mist, dungeons, meta events, any bosses that has any defined bar, you can cast this signet onto them and it will deal 1000 points into their defined bars, and thus that is one of the most powerful CC skills that I have seen in the game, and so make use of that. Alright, so all the utility that I also consider to swap on the regular basics, I refer that to the blink if I need to get away. So in particular in the World Vigor environment, I do use this one quite a lot because it allows me to get away from the battle and get into the safe distance. Other than that, I also prefer to use the feedback. So the feedback allows me to reflect the projectiles back to the target enemy, and the portal allows me to summon a portal that allows me to transport my team members, my allies, from one location to the other. So, and then this one, Phanstamo Defender, allows me to provide protection onto my allies and also onto myself, so that I can reduce the incoming damage, providing more survivability for the rest of the team. So in terms of the mechanics, In terms of the mechanic, the ability to shatter your illusions to be able to deal the damage. So you're looking at the F1 to the F4 skill, and the F1 is, you know, somewhat destroy all your clones and phantasms and damage in nearby foe. And when you are doing that, it will provide you with the ability to have the vigor that allows you to have 150 points in condition damage, but also 50% in endurance regeneration. So that is ridiculous. The next one, I have the Krait of Frustration, which allows me to apply the confusion damage onto my enemy. And the third one, I have Diversion, so I can inflict the blind onto my enemy, so next outgoing attacks, they are missed. So for the last one, I have Distortion, so gain Distortion and destroy all your clones and phantasms, and gain additional Distortion for each one shattered. So Distortion allows me to evade all of the attacks. Now I have a bad news. At the time of me filming this video, the newest patch on December, I believe it was the 7th or the 10th, I honestly can't remember the exact date. I think it was on the 12th. Yes, it was on the 12th, and the distortion would now only works for you. You do not have the ability to share it to your allies. So that is one of the drawbacks that this is the thing about me. I prefer to provide the support, as many support skills that I can for my team members, and so having to see the reductions in the number of targets that this skill can provide to my team member is actually make me feel a little bit I don't know. I actually don't have a word for this. I feel like I'm not supporting my team as much as I used to, and so I actually feel a little bit less useful. But that is just purely for me. However, in saying that, the skill itself provides you with the ability to have an additional survival that you can get away from the battles. Sorry, not getting away from the battles, but negating the attacks coming from the boss, or maybe coming from your target enemies, wherever that may be. So like in World War, target enemy players can, you know, attack you, and so you can use this to get away from those attacks or evade those attacks. So that is one of the most useful skills that I have seen, and so I highly recommend you to use that on a regular basis. Now before we move on to the equipment, let me just quickly touch on to my secondary weapons. So I keep my pistol, but I also have a spare staff so that I can use on a regular basis as well, and that's just for my own preference. Feel free to use any other weapon. So for example, if you feel like the need to use the scepter, feel free to use them, but for me personally, I keep a spare staff just so that when I'm doing meta events, I can swap to this weapon, and that allows me to have additional additional AoE spell, so in the form of the last one, the Cow Storm, but I fully aware that I already have another one in here, but it doesn't hurt to have another one. Another thing that you should be aware of, and that is your endurance, your dodge. This is one of the special mechanics of the Condition Mirage. You are no longer dodge backward. I will show you what I mean. So traditionally for the Mesmer, if you press the dodge button, or any other characters, any classes, when you press the dodge button, the character will roll backward or roll forward depending on the direction. But with the Mirage, you do not have the ability to dodge backward or roll forward, or whatever you want to call it. Instead, you're standing on a single spot and you deal damage to the enemy surrounding you. So that's exactly what I mean, that you should be aware of this one, purely on the fact that you can't get away from the attack anymore, so you have to time it really well. You still can evade the attack, don't get me wrong. What I mean is that if the attack coming from that way, you have to time it really well so that you can either sidestep to the other side, or alternatively, use distortion or time it really well so that after the attack is gone, you can you can get away from that attacks without being damaged by it. So you have to time it really well. But in saying that, you now have the ability to deal additional damage, and that is in the form of attacking at the same time with your dodge, and that is something that you have to factor into your rotations. Alright, so that is all I have to say about the specialization. Now let's get on to the equipment. So in regard to my equipment, I'm still using the same set as in the Viper set that I have previously used for my conditions Mesmer. And in regard to the rune, I have swapped completely to the Superior Rune of Renegade. Reason for that is because the Superior Rune of Renegade allows me to have condition damage, ferocity, which is critical damage, but it also allows me to have a fixed increase in 7% of my condition damage, and that's something that I prefer. Now in regard to my Sigil, I have the Superior Sigil of Malice, and the other one, the torch, I have the Superior Sigil of Energy. The reason for me to have the Superior Sigil of Energy is because I have an increase in 50% of my endurance when I swap to this weapon when I'm in the combat, and as part of the rotation I do swap a lot, and I also teleporting a lot. So having additional endurance allows me to regenerate my endurance so that I can pump out more of my dodges. And as I have previously mentioned, the dodges is now considered to be one of your attacks as well, and that is factored into your rotation, and that exactly is my intention, to regenerate my endurance as fast as possible so that I can pump out more damage. So that is all I have to say regarding my condition Mirage. If you have any question for me, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. As always, good luck, have fun, I will see you later.